Have you ever wondered how a single gunshot could plunge the whole world into chaos? This question takes us back to the early 20th century, the summer of 1914, to be precise. A time when the world was a chessboard, with powerful nations vying for control, influence, and prestige. Among these nations were the Central Powers, including Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, and the Allies, primarily France, the United Kingdom, and Russia. The game was tense, the players apprehensive, and the world unknowingly on the brink of a catastrophe. Then, in Sarajevo, a gunshot echoed. The Archduke of Austria, Franz Ferdinand, fell, assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. This single event, this solitary bullet, was the catalyst. It disrupted the fragile balance of power, leading to a chain of events that would spiral into the First World War. Just like a spark can start a wildfire, this single event set the world ablaze. As nations took sides, armies mobilized, and early battles began to shape the war's landscape. The summer of 1914 saw a flurry of activity as nations geared up for war. Soldiers were conscripted, uniforms were issued, and military leaders began to plot their strategies. The formation of alliances played a crucial role in the mobilization of forces. The Triple Entente, consisting of France, Russia, and Britain, stood in opposition to the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These alliances, however, were more than just military partnerships. They were entangled webs of political and colonial interests that would influence the course of the war. As the armies mobilized, the first major battle of the war began. The Battle of the Frontiers, fought in August 1914, saw the armies of Germany and France clash along their shared border. It was a series of engagements that set the tone for the war, a brutal stalemate with heavy casualties on both sides. Then came the Battle of Tannenberg, a conflict on the Eastern Front between Germany and Russia. The Russians, despite having superior numbers, were soundly defeated by the well-prepared German forces. The battle was a devastating blow to Russian morale and a significant victory for the Central Powers. These early battles were characterized by traditional warfare tactics clashing with the realities of modern weaponry. Cavalry charges met with machine gun fire, and bright, colorful uniforms became targets in the smoke-filled battlefields. These battles were a stark introduction to what would become the defining war of a generation. However, these early battles were just the beginning of a much larger, much bloodier conflict. The initial stages of World War I set the stage for a global struggle that would redefine the nature of warfare and change the world forever. These were the opening moves in a deadly game, a game that would last 4 long years and claim the lives of millions. Imagine living in a muddy trench surrounded by the constant threat of death. Welcome to the reality of trench warfare. The concept of trench warfare is as simple as it is chilling. Dig a hole in the ground, live in it, and shoot at the enemy from the safety of this makeshift fortification. This was a grim reality for soldiers during World War I, a tactic born out of necessity as traditional warfare strategies proved futile against the modern weaponry of the early 20th century. Imagine walking in the boots of a soldier, stepping into a trench for the first time. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and the lingering scent of gunpowder. The ground beneath you is a muddy mess, churned by the countless feet that have come before you. The walls of the trench are lined with sandbags, a feeble shield against the deadly rain of bullets and shells. Life in the trenches was a harsh existence, marked by constant vigilance, cramped quarters, and the ever-present threat of artillery fire. Soldiers lived in a state of perpetual readiness, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the guns. Day and night blurred together, sleep was a luxury few could afford, and meals were often interrupted by the call to arms. But it wasn't just the enemy they had to fear. Disease was rife, with trench foot and dysentery common among the soldiers. Rats, lice, and fleas were constant companions, thriving in the unsanitary conditions. And then there were the battles. The Battle of the Somme, for example, was a key engagement that saw the use of trench warfare on a colossal scale. Over 1 million men were wounded or killed in this battle alone, making it one of the bloodiest confrontations in human history. The brutality of trench warfare painted a grim picture of the war, a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. But as we'll see, this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. While the land echoed with gunfire, the seas and skies also became theaters of conflict. The oceans were far from peaceful during the Great War. Naval battles became a pivotal part of the conflict, with both the Allies and Central Powers vying for control of the seas. The British Royal Navy, renowned for its size and prowess, clashed with the German High Seas Fleet in epic battles. The most notable of these was the Battle of Jutland, a 2-day naval confrontation that saw the deployment of some of the largest warships of that era. However, it was not just the surface of the sea that bore witness to the strife. Beneath the waves, German U-boats prowled, hunting down enemy vessels. Their stealth and deadly efficiency redefined naval warfare, causing considerable damage to the Allied forces. The sinking of passenger ships like the Lusitania by these undersea predators sparked international outrage and shifted public opinions, pushing nations closer to the brink of war. Let's not forget the skies. For the first time in history, war was not confined to the land and sea. The advent of aircrafts introduced a new dimension to warfare, the aerial battlefield. The early years of the war saw aircrafts primarily used for reconnaissance. But as the conflict dragged on, their role evolved. Fighter planes and bombers took to the air, engaging in thrilling dogfights and dropping bombs on enemy lines. The skies became arenas for daring pilots, the aces of the war, who braved the dangers to secure air superiority for their respective sides. These included figures such as Manfred von Richthofen, the infamous Red Baron, whose exploits have since become the stuff of legend. The Great War ushered in a new era of warfare, where battles were fought not just on land but also at sea and in the air. From the mighty battleships to the silent U-boats, from the humble reconnaissance aircrafts to the deadly bombers, each played a significant role in shaping the course of the war. The war was not limited to the trenches. It was truly a global conflict. In 1917, the scales of war tipped with the entry of a new player, the United States. Initially maintaining a stance of neutrality, the United States was drawn into the conflict for a multitude of reasons. The sinking of the passenger ship Lusitania by a German submarine, which claimed over 1,000 lives, including Americans, sparked outrage. Moreover, the interception of the Zimmermann telegram, where Germany promised Mexico American territory in exchange for an alliance, was the final straw. The impact of the United States joining the war was profound. The infusion of fresh troops, resources, and a booming industrial power provided a significant boost to the exhausted Allies. American soldiers, known as doughboys, fought bravely on the Western Front, making a decisive contribution to key battles. The United States' entry also marked a shift in the global balance of power, as it emerged as a key player on the world stage. With the entry of the United States, the tide of war began to turn. By 1918, the war had taken a heavy toll on all sides. But how did it finally end? The answer lies in a series of events that led to the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Faced with numerous uprisings, the German High Command acknowledged defeat and sought an armistice. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the fighting ceased. Yet the formal end of the war was not realized until months later, in the grand halls of the Palace of Versailles. Here, on June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. This document, steeped in controversy, placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany and Austria-Hungary, demanding hefty reparations and territorial concessions. Many historians argue that the punitive nature of the treaty sowed the seeds for future conflicts. And so, the guns fell silent. But the echoes of World War I would resonate for generations to come. The war was over, but what was the cost? The aftermath of the Great War was as profound as the conflict itself. Empires crumbled, giving birth to new nations. The political map of the world was drastically redrawn. The human cost was staggering. Over 10 million soldiers lost their lives, and countless more were wounded, physically and mentally. Civilian casualties were equally devastating, with millions more lives claimed by the war and its aftermath. The societal changes were immense too. The roles of women in society, for instance, were forever transformed as they stepped into roles previously occupied by men. The seeds of another conflict were also sown in the ashes of the war. The Versailles Treaty, perceived as a severe punishment by some nations, especially Germany, laid the groundwork for the rise of fascism and the outbreak of World War II. World War I was a conflict that not only changed the world but also shaped the course of the 20th century.